Hello, and welcome to the podcast where our goal is to remind you that amidst the chaos and craziness of the world, there is still plenty of good that's worth shouting about. In each episode, we're going to be joined by nonprofit professionals, leaders, experts, and advocates to hear their stories, facilitate connection within the nonprofit sector, and hopefully put a smile on your face. That's always nice. This is Nonprofit Connect with Matt Barnes. Let's share some good. This has been a Rogue Creatives production. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I've never started off that way, but sure, why not?
Yeah, thank you, Matthew.
Yeah. There was a time where I was like, I should be Matthew. And then I'm like, that it just doesn't feel right because I've been Matt my whole life and whatever. But
I get it. I grew up Danny. And then
really?
I did make the switch to Daniel,
nice,
which is super confusing for a small portion of people in my life. But everyone else, they got it.
I had a friend, I won't go too off on a tangent here, but I had a friend who named Emily, and she went to college. And immediately at the first event she went to, she met like 5 Emilys. And so her middle name's Victoria. So she just, without consulting anyone or even thinking about it, she just started introducing herself as Tori.
Okay.
Didn't tell anybody back home. This was back in the days of landlines. And so people would call her house on the weekends or whatever and ask for Tori. And her parents are like, you got the wrong number. It was a very confusing time for all of us.
She lost a lot of friends that summer.
Yeah, she did a birthday party and it was half people from home and half people from school. And half were going like, where's Emily? Wait, who's Emily? Where's Tori? Anyway. All right. So before we jump in, we always start off with a segment we call 3 Random Questions. We've got a list of, I don't know, I think we're up to like 80, 90 questions now. And we got a randomizer that chooses 3. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. What is your favorite animated movie?
I'm going to go real classic and say like the original Lion King.
Oh, nice. Very good. I saw that in the theaters. That's a good one.
Thank you.
I do judge your answers. Just in case you're wondering, yeah. I will definitely tell you. No.
There's a score. All right. Good.
Right. You're doing well so far. Let's keep it going. All right. We're moving on to the next round for 300 point. No. One music artist or band you can choose to listen to for the rest of your life. Who is it?
Oh, come on. So, Matt, I've listened to quite a few of the episodes. And I'm like, maybe I'll get the Superpowers one. Maybe I'll get What I Had for Breakfast. I get one artist to listen for the rest of my life. I think the easy answer would be the Beatles.
Excellent.
Because
you can't go wrong with that.
You can't go wrong with it.
Right.
Whereas I'll go with the Beatles.
Are you more of a like early or like a Sgt. Pepper's kind of Beatles?
More of a Sgt. Pepper.
Nice.
Less of a Hold Your Hand.
Yeah. I mean, I love the early stuff too, but man, they really it's for them to go on the journey they went on in like 8 years is insane. Yeah. I'm just so fascinated by that.
And just how prolific they were.
Right.
That is when they're like, 20 songs a week. What?
Yeah. And they're all hits. They're all just like some of the best songs ever written. Amazing. Yes. Very good. In fact, we've got Beatles playing here in the building today. Final question. What is your go-to karaoke song?
I would say it's If I Ever Fall in Love by Shy, which is an a cappella song.
Yeah. Wow. That's a great song.
It's a pretty big power move when you get on karaoke and say, I don't need the musical accompaniment. Just give me the microphone.
Just karaoke. So a cappella karaoke. You're just singing. That is a baller move. I like it.
Is that technically karaoke?
I don't know. I don't really care. Right. I love it. I think it's great.
Cool.
Rules, who needs them, right? You make your rules. All right. Bonus question. Which superpower would you have?
Oh, man.
Since you prepared for that one.
Well, the only reason why I'm prepared for it is 'cause someone recently asked it to me.
Oh, okay.
And my answer was I would want the power to always feel like I got a full night's sleep. Just like always feel super rested.
That might be the best answer I've ever heard.
I have a new answer, though.
Oh, okay.
And that is I would like the superpower to always know what size Tupperware to grab to put leftovers in. Because I always get it wrong.
And if you could find the right lid to go with it.
Oh, that's greedy. But yeah.
Yeah. Because it's like the Tupperware and lids is like socks in the dryer, right? There's always the mismatch. There will always be the monster and they're stealing our things.
Yeah.
And anyway, I think it's my kids, but I'm not really sure. Could be the dog. Anyway, all right. Well, Daniel, I said this to you before we started recording, but I was a little surprised when you popped up. You're a younger man than I anticipated with your resume. Tell us your origin story and how you got to where you are now and what you're working on. Just a,
Yeah.
like little thing like that.
I appreciate it. I'm going to take that as I look good for my age. We'll
Yeah.
go with that
Okay.
instead. But so I have spent my entire career working to mitigate climate change. I went to school with that thought of like, I'm going to work on environmental issues. And I really kind of started from this place of like, I'm pretty good at physics. I'll be an engineer. Started more in like the technical side. I worked at like a startup. I worked at consulting, all kind of in this energy efficiency, sustainability space. And then I made a real hard pivot into the nonprofit sector, but still
Yeah.
in climate. Realized two things. One, I much prefer working on the nonprofit side because it's way more aligned with the values and the actual purpose of why I want to do this work. And two, I'm just so far from a technical person. So
Okay.
I realized that's not my place. So I've really spent more of my career building programs that help other people take climate action. To date, I think cumulatively it's been like 12,000 people that my work has actually touched and impacted.
Nice.
Um, and I founded my own nonprofit. I now work at one of the big greens. And then I've been working on some kind of like just side community projects.
Okay.
And happy to get into all those, but that's going to be my like super short where I am right now.
And is the nonprofit you started, is that still going?
It's not. So it ran for 5 years.
Okay.
So it's called Green Impact Campaign. We were solely focused on getting students a real life experience with energy efficiency. So we would train them on how to actually help small businesses save energy. And we did that for 5 years. And we found out that like 90% of the students that went through the program talked about that in interviews. It was like this very small project they did, but was real instead of like, I took this course or I did this class project.
Sure.
Yeah. So it ran for 5 years and then we all kind of moved on to other things.
What is it about climate change that really is connect with?
I hear my colleagues and like friends that work in this space answer this question, and it's always just such a beautiful story they tell. I was hiking and I saw this like amazing bird and like I realized I have to save this and like, beautiful stories of like being in nature and like connecting with it. I'm more of like an indoor person. I'll go for the occasional hike.
Sure. Yeah.
The reality of why I worked on this is when it came time in my life to like pick a career, I just thought like, well, if I'm going to spend this much time working, I just want it to matter and like be something worthwhile. And at the time I looked around and said, what's like the biggest threat to humanity? It's climate change. Cool. That's the one. Like that's what it feels like is the only thing worth working on right now. And boy, was that a good call back then because it's only getting more so, not less so since then.
And what I mean is that for somebody who's not in that industry, that's frustrating. For you, that's got to be just maddening, right? To be like, we see this coming, this snowball coming, and instead of going, hey, we can stop this thing, we're just letting it turn into a giant avalanche. I don't even know if that metaphor holds up, but you know what I mean? But you know what I'm saying?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's like an innate level of optimism that you have to have while working on this because every day you wake up, it seems like the fire's gotten larger, not smaller.
Sure.
Everything is just burning.
And sometimes
more so than not, literally now. Things are either burning or flooding.
Right.
So I mean, you're totally right though. Like it's very frustrating as just a human, but also even more so as someone working in the space. But for me, that's like the outlet. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like climate anxiety has become a real thing for people. And for me, I found that the best thing to help alleviate that is to spend my days working on it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always interesting how, because things get so politicized, and I mean,
Yeah.
we could talk about COVID, we could talk about any topic that just should be about facts and science, and
Yeah.
it gets politicized, and then it becomes this thing that is so divisive instead of
Yeah.
just anything else that makes sense in our lives that's personal. You go, oh, that's a problem, let's fix it. But we go, there's so many things that, because of politics and because of the world the way it is, become something where you go, oh, that's something we should fix, and people go, no, 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 that's not
Yeah.
real. You don't. That's Matt. You're imagining that.
Yeah. There's there's spheres like of that. There's like the big ones where it's like people yelling that it's not man-made or
Yeah,
like that it doesn't exist. And that's like okay.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's just a whole thing in itself. But then even within the actual industry of people working on climate, there's like these semantics sometimes where it's like, well, no, and you kind of step back sometimes. You're like, what are we doing? We don't have time for this. We don't have time to like argue about something that we're all working on the same thing. It's just, but yeah, there's so many levels of like politics that do make it frustrating. I feel like I've spent this whole interview just talking about how frustrating this work
well, I keep
is.
asking you questions about it,
Yeah.
but
No,
I do
okay.
think, you said there's an inherent optimism needed
Yeah.
to be able to do this. And this is a topic that comes up, I think, over and over again on this podcast, in conversations that I have in the nonprofit space in general, because people are tackling large issues. This may
Yeah.
be the largest as far as existential. But I think these are people, you are a person, these are people that I've talked to that are taking on these large issues that a lot of times have become politicized. And even if they haven't, it's something that it's oftentimes fighting an uphill battle. And you have to, if you don't have some sort of hope or optimism in it, then, you're not going to survive. How do you keep that in one that is so heavily politicized and is so existential for us? How do you find that?
Yeah, for me it is on it like the human level. So
Right.
for me, I think that's why I naturally gravitated working towards more of like working with people and not like is because when I'm having a conversation with someone and they have like, one of the things I do is I run an internal innovation lab at in the Environmental Defense Fund. And when I see someone come with a new idea and then like watch them bring it to life and then see the impact that that idea has had on thousands of other people, that there is like a certain level of satisfaction and a certain level of if that changed this person and that actually impacted these people, let's keep that going. Let's keep doing
Right.
more of that. Because in terms of climate change, it's not a technology problem. It's not a finance problem. It's 100% a human capital problem.
Right.
We need more people working on this, not with chief sustainability officer titles, but just more people finding ways to work on this in their jobs. And we need more people to care about this, which is even harder of a challenge. But we have everything we need. It's just we need people in the right places to actually put the things into motion. And that's
Sure.
just super hard because people are hard.
Well, and I imagine, I mean, part of it is that, and part of it is also people being willing to give up the things
Yeah.
that need to be given up.
Yeah.
And even if I mean, I'll take a very simplistic, but okay, we have electric cars. Obviously, there's things still in the production, all that to be worked out. But inherently a cleaner technology.
Yeah.
But you've got people who are just like, well, you can take my, gas powered engine over my dead body.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I drive a Tesla, and I've driven nice, fast, fun cars in my life. This is honestly the best car I've ever had. It's got its
Yeah.
whatever, but it is fast. It is fun. And it also is energy efficient, all these things.
Yeah.
So, at some point you go, that doesn't really even hold up. What is it here that we are fighting against? This is the 0 to 60 on this, $60,000 car is faster than most $150,000 cars. All the thing, the maintenance is less, the this, the that, whatever. Where, what are we fighting for here on the other side? What is
Yeah.
it? And it comes down to people just don't want like change. People just don't want
Yeah.
to give up their things and they don't like change. And there's a lot of money in
Yes.
those industries in those areas. So, there's a lot to combat there.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to me that and again, as somebody from the outside who's just reading the news, that as there's constantly new technologies and electric cars have come as far as they have and other technologies and all this, we're still fighting this battle because it's almost like every time there's progress here, they're like, but
Yeah.
we're going to do this here.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
There's a lot of that. You can see a lot of that too with like the anti-ESG rhetoric going around now, where it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. This is not what we can't let like this woke ESG stuff take over how we report on finances. That's where it's really frustrating. But you're right. There's these different levels of the company and industry level. It's seen as a threat to money.
Right.
It's if we change, then we're losing our business model. When a lot of those industries actually have a huge financial opportunity to lean into this more. And then on the individual level, it is a level of change. And I think a lot of it is like an image thing too, right? Like
Sure.
people like things because they're part of a community that way.
Sure.
So it is a challenge to get that moving. And that's why I say I think it's more of a people problem than a technology or a finance problem. But I think Tesla's really interesting. There's a really interesting documentary made called Who Killed the Electric Car?
Mm,
And it's about how electric cars were actually created a long time ago. I
sure.
think maybe back in like the 80s or 90s, maybe. And some people were driving them and they loved them. And then, like, mysteriously, they just got killed. They just were taken off the road. The people that got them were kind of like taken back. And they're like, why are you taking this back? And the documentary kind of goes through like who was behind that in a way,
Yeah.
like who didn't want these cars on the road and who didn't want it to be prolific. But um, I think Tesla's a great example, and all the other EV makers where like someone figured out, okay, maybe we try to do this in a way that people don't see it as a drastic change. It's like a cool
Sure.
sports car that happens to be
Exactly.
electric.
And I mean, without getting too crazy political or whatever, I'm not a huge Elon Musk fan anymore,
Yeah.
especially. But
Yeah.
there was something that Tesla did that I think they approached it in a different way. I feel like, and
Yeah.
because they weren't also tied to the legacy automakers, had a little bit more freedom. But it
Yeah.
was like, no, we're going to try to give you something that not only competes with what you think is great and luxury or sports car or whatever, but we're going to get better
Yeah.
and try and make this mainstream. And now all the other legacy automakers are kind of racing to catch up and figure out, well, how do we do this? And really, so, credit where it's due, did kickstart that whole thing, I think,
Yeah.
because it was almost non-existent at that point. I mean, hybrids were happening, but you know, hybrids only go so
Hybrids,
far.
like, why did the first Prius look like dustbusters? Like, who decided that's a perfect example of like, it's almost like it was intentionally made to look like a symbol of like, oh, this thing is different,
Right.
but also like,
But
why?
also ugly.
Why not make it, why not make
Not
it
even good
look?
different.
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, like, I want to, hear your examples and things that you have from your industry, but I do think a lot of this stuff is so um applicable to almost any nonprofit. Of we're all sort of facing these uphill battles in these areas. There is so much in having to be able to find that optimism and be able
Yeah.
to uh be able to go to work every day and still be like, yeah, I want to do this. 'Cause
Yeah.
in some ways you're just going to get beat up over and over again. Are there practical things that you've found for yourself that keep you going, or that I don't know, because burnout in these
Yeah.
is so real.
Yeah, I realized a while back that when I'm not at work, I limit the amount of content I consume related to
Mm,
climate change. So I'm not like doom scrolling through articles. I'm not like constantly watching documentaries about climate change. Like I realized very early on that is where I would get in trouble is like 24 hours a day. I'm just reading
yeah.
about how terrible things are.
Yeah.
Um, that's the big one for me. So when I'm not working, I'm usually trying to read or watch or listen to like anything else kind of thing.
Sure.
And not only does that give me a break, but I also have found like there's usually a lot of really interesting things to learn from other industries or from other topics that can then be like pulled into climate work that maybe people aren't thinking about.
Yeah.
Like behavior change, right? Like that's psychology
Sure.
study, but like it's really interesting when it's applied to climate. The big one. The other one I think is just finding community. I think that's
Yeah.
like that one's throughout my career that I learned that one when I was an entrepreneur and I was going through a lot of stuff by myself and I didn't have a team and like you feel so isolated that you just, I mean, I'm sure you've experienced some of that in the early days. Like it's hard to go to like a happy hour with your friends that have like a corporate job and be like,
Yeah.
man, payroll, am I right, guys? And they're like, what? No, I don't know what that's. So there's like some real things that you want to talk about, but you don't know. So I was part of a couple really great like incubators and accelerators and met some amazing people and like it felt like I found my people. And that really kept me going. I think the same is true about climate work too.
Sure.
Is like finding people that are working on it and they get it. Is always really kind of re-energizing when you're a bit down. So I would say those two are the ones that I've really like held on to the most, besides like exercise and eating healthy and all these things that like it's just healthy.
What's that like? Exercise and eating healthy. Tell me. I've had kids. Those things have not been happening as much, and I need to
I
work on that.
I get it. I get that.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? Something you just said made me think, and this may not be an original thought in any way, but are there people approaching climate change or like because you started out saying climate change is a people problem, right?
Yeah.
Is there an organization or are there people, are there studies, are there things being done looking at simply, and I mean, yes, obviously the new technologies and all of that, but just
Yeah.
do we address the psychology of this? And if we focus on that, could we make some headway here? Like, the psychology of people being stuck in their ways or not being open to change or whatever it might be. I mean, I feel like that could be, again, applied to homelessness or so many issues in the world. But
Yeah.
um, I don't know. Is that an area that's being explored?
I think it is, which is great.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's as explicit as the way that you're laying out, but
Yeah.
for example, when I mean, this must have been 10 years ago, I found out about Doug McKinsey Moore really pioneered this thing called community-based social marketing.
Mm,
And the whole concept was like, how do we get behavior change for sustainable action? And it's just looking at like human psychology, community norms, like really getting back to that kind of fundamental. And I go back to his kind of teachings very often, I would say. There's also a big movement going on right now around like, how do we get people to use their current jobs towards climate? So, again, like very people centered, less on like the psychology side, but more
sure.
on like tapping into that climate anxiety of people like waking up, going to their job and be like, I feel like I should be doing something more.
Mhm.
There's some really good work going on. Project Drawdown's doing great work. There's these communities like Work on Climate that's popping up where like it's just bringing people together to really think about that. And that's actually what we need. That what we need is more of people finding ways to use their existing jobs and figuring out how to like use their influence as an employee to put some pressure on their company to actually take actions. That's where you get some scalable impact.
Sure.
But I'm sure there's like more research being done on the
Yeah.
psychology, but in terms of organizations, I think some are probably having some trouble getting funding because it is so hard to measure that in some cases. But
Sure.
I think it's growing, which is
Well,
encouraging.
and that sort of leads me to my next thing I wanted to talk to you about because you brought this up when you were going back and forth with my team too, talking about that philanthropic giving typically doesn't allow for a lot of risk taking. It doesn't allow
Yeah.
for a lot of exploration. And this is a topic that comes up a lot as well. Just in that, the culture around nonprofits has unfortunately become one where directed giving is the standard. Everybody feels like they are, I don't know, entitled to their say. If I've donated money, I get to say how you're going to spend it.
Yeah.
And so nonprofits are not run the way that for-profits are. They're not run effectively and efficiently, and they're not allowed to spend money on the things that are actually going to help them be successful, or to take risks and to do some research, or to try things that may not work, but we'll learn to go out and become the experts like a company would. What your experience there, Ben, and what thoughts have you had on that?
I think you kind of hit it right on the head with that. I think traditionally, a lot of philanthropic giving, like you said, is very direct in terms of we are going to give you this money. You're going to lay out the exact plan on what you're going to do with that money. Like,
Yeah.
give us an action plan, give us month by month breakdown, and then the exact outcomes and the impact that it's going to have. What that doesn't do is allow organizations to take risks, fail along the way, and then be like, oh, wow, this thing that we wrote out might not be true because we just learned this thing. And what would
Yeah.
be more impactful is actually change this. A lot of folks, can go back to a donor or a foundation and say like, hey, we learned this, we want to change it. But then to your point, like it's up to them if they say yes or no to that. And
Right.
that's a huge risk if you're or if you're really like depending on that money that you've just brought in. It's just really limiting in terms of the potential impact. So what ends up happening is people still just kind of go through it, even though they know there's something more they could have done. And it's a problem. The other challenge I've seen is a lot of philanthropic giving does not like to support overhead. It's always
No.
like, what are the project costs?
Yes.
But we don't want to hear about salaries.
Right. We don't have real
And
salaries or marketing or,
yeah, yeah, marketing is always a big one too. You're right. So that's if you talk to, I mean, I'll just speak from my own experience, but
sure.
as someone that ran a nonprofit, like that was the biggest need to get the work done. It
Right.
wasn't like, I don't even know, because we were like a virtual training, like everything was online. Like,
Yeah.
what are we going to spend our costs on? It's just people.
Yeah.
And that's really challenging, folks. I think if I had it my way, I think philanthropic giving would be a little bit more of the VC model where it's
Mhm.
like, you know what, we're gonna make 10 bets
Yeah.
and we're gonna put it out there and one or two of those might hit and they might be big. Like they might do something big with this money that we gave them that
Yeah.
we came to terms with might not go anywhere. That's where I think nonprofits could really start to do some things that would just like multiply the impact that they could have or learn a ton more along the way that they can then share with others and like really bring others into it. So that's I mentioned earlier, but this innovation lab that I run, that's our entire model.
Mm.
We found some amazing donors that support that kind of model. And our whole thing is if 100% of the projects that we're funding are successful, then we're failing because
Right.
clearly we're not taking enough risks. So it's been this space where it's just like bring in the idea, let's see what we learn from it. That's always our biggest metric is like, what did you learn from running this pilot? Not what was the impact of the pilot.
Right.
Because then that gives us more tools and that gives us more things we can do in the future.
Right. Right. That's how we get to impact. Right.
Yeah.
And that's why I think so many nonprofits are running in circles doing the same thing here. When people donate, whether it's individuals or grants or corporations or whatever, they're looking going, I want to support that program. I want this
Yeah.
money to go to this thing.
Yeah.
And so they're not even able to go, but we wanted to try something new,
Yeah.
and these are, to let them be the experts who are out there trying to solve this problem. This is why part of, we do a lot of marketing, storytelling for a lot of these nonprofits. And one of the things that I've trying to get shifted is this idea of people are not, like a nonprofit that works with kids a lot of times invest in this child's life. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. Invest in this nonprofit. You're investing in, and so that they can try
Yeah.
and make this child's life. Like that's where you're investing your funds. And, marketing is, especially for a nonprofit, is not overhead. This is mission critical. Like your
Yeah.
whole thing is to bring people awareness and get more support. Well, you got to get the story out there. You got to bring people into it. How is that? How are you going to criticize people for spending money and resources on that? If they're doing it poorly, okay, that's one thing. But it's created this, and I think it started maybe from a good place of people were abusing the system. So hey, we got to have some. But now it's gotten to a place where a lot of nonprofits are feeling like they can't do it. They're just not as effective as they could be.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a lack of it's a lack of opportunity to learn.
Yeah,
Like you were just talking about like this concept of like could someone go out there and study and like put together programs for like the psychology behind climate change and behavior change. Like that would be a hard thing to get funded, right? Because
absolutely.
you don't know, like you don't know what that would look like. You don't know what the next year of that would look like. You're saying this is thing I want to explore.
Right,
It might lead nowhere, but like it
right.
might lead somewhere. That's the exact area of why I said like probably hard to get funding for that
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
it's tough.
We're doing a screening here for one of our live nonprofit connect events next month of the Uncharitable movie, the documentary that came out. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but
Mhm.
Dan Pallotta, if you're not, he'd done a TED talk years ago that really challenged these ideas for nonprofits of
Yeah.
the basic idea that I walked away from his TED talk was, if you want to be an effective nonprofit, you need to run your nonprofit as like it's a for
Yeah.
profit. The only
Yeah.
I had a guest on who said nonprofit is not a tax status. It's not a job description. This doesn't dictate how you run your business. It dictates what forms you need to fill out and all that. But and the taxes. But now and they wrote a book based on that, and now they've turned it into a documentary. And really, I mean, one of the things we're working with in the nonprofits we work with and looking at is how do we help change that public perception, get people who are on boards and people who are volunteers and all that to kind of understand this so that we can help spread a different idea of how to support nonprofits. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost, it's a huge it's asking, it's kind of like climate change. It's a huge shift. It's like, how do we change everybody's way they think about this thing? But
Yeah.
it has to be done in some way because I feel like nonprofits are so stuck and we're not able to make the impact that should be made. Climate change
Yeah.
should be ahead of where it is now, but
It,
it's,
definitely not getting this much worse,
right,
right? Like you would
right.
think at least staying the same, but
Yeah, we
um
should have been able to at least like get it to a neutral place. But it's
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
every year I see the reports, by this date, if this doesn't happen and then the date gets moved back and then
Yeah.
and it's just like at some point that date's going to come and we're
Yeah.
screwed.
Yeah.
Well, on that note,
We're back here again.
yeah. How do we give hope to people? How do we close this on a positive note?
No, I think well, just one comment to what you were saying is in terms of like getting others to think that way. One thing I have found to be I don't know, a bit of a bridge is when I'm talking to people that are from the private sector or the venture capital sector or corporate,
Hmm.
whatever it's a little bit quicker in
Hmm.
terms of, and they've come over to philanthropy. Like it's a little quicker to kind of draw that comparison of like, well, think of like R&D in a company. It's like, oh yeah, I got you. Like
Yeah.
that part of it, I think those are going to be kind of the allies to help champion some of that message. Um, but yeah, it's to your point, it's still very difficult.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, man, this has been really informative. I feel like you and I could probably keep talking for a few hours if if we didn't have time limits on us.
Yeah.
What we always close with a few questions, and you kind of commented on one of these earlier, is the need for community and
Mhm.
feeling connected. What now today where you're at? What makes you feel most connected to your community?
So about, I don't know, a year and a half. Time is so weird.
I know, right?
Yeah, but I guess year and a half, let's say. A year and a half ago, I started this initiative called Open Door Climate. It started, you know, through the years, I get a lot of requests in terms of like, hey, I'm kind of interested in working in the space. Could you do a coffee chat? And I took and take as many of those as I could. But one day I was like, what if I'm more proactive about this? So I put up just like a status on LinkedIn saying like, hey, I have an open door policy. Anyone that's talk about it, just reach out. I ended up talking to 50 people in 2 weeks because
Wow.
like I just was getting so many requests. And I realized like there's a real need for this. So I tapped some of my network and some of my friends and said like, if you're willing to do this, put up the status. Um, and from there, this like amazing community has formed, and now it's like 1,500 climate professionals
Wow.
have put together this policy. There's been like tens of thousands of conversations that have been had, and the whole like concept is we need to make it way more accessible for people to just have these informal conversations with people,
Mhm.
if they're interested in the space. Like if I wanted to be a teacher tomorrow, I'd probably think of like some teachers that I know and be
Yeah.
like, hey, can I just talk to you real quick? Like,
Sure.
just tell me like how it is. What do you do day to day? What did
Right.
you go to school for? It's really hard to do that with climate work because there's just less, it's been around a lot shorter period of time. There's less people that might know someone. For me, that's been like a huge source of inspiration and like optimism is watching this like very organic community, just like volunteer time come together and then just hearing people be like, that's all I needed. Like
That's
I've
awesome.
just been waiting for like a 15-minute conversation just to get a couple questions answered. Been a huge source lately.
That's really cool. I may steal that idea. I mean, I just, I love talking to people, and this is an area where, I said, we've been trying to really help change people's minds about how to approach nonprofits, and that might be, another way to do it. But that's really great. Is there one person in the world of nonprofits that you would want to take to lunch? Who would that be?
Maybe like I'll say Cheryl Dorsey. I think she's still the executive director of Echoing Green, which is like the incubator program that like got me started.
Okay,
Not because I haven't been to lunch with her, but just because I haven't seen her in a while and it'd be nice to catch up.
perfect. That's
Just
great.
tell her how much I appreciated all the work that they did and still do.
Yeah. Feel like I know maybe what your answer would be to this, but the last question, what aspect of your job brings you the most joy?
Yeah, I mean, I think you do know the answer, but no, I think it's having conversations with people that have gone through some kind of like transformation of like I'm on the other side of
Mm.
this climate anxiety, or I'm using my job for climate. That's the big one.
Do you find this is a little bit going back, I guess, but do you find that if you can sit down, if you can have a one-on-one conversation with somebody who is resistant, who is that they're more open, that when they're separated from the group mentality?
No, I don't.
Damn.
No, I think there are people that are very good at that. I don't know if I'm one of them. And this might sound bad, but like I have been working on this for 15 years
Sure.
and like I'm tired. I'm
Sure.
I'm really tired and like I don't know how much energy I have to sit down and debate with someone if they
Right.
firmly don't believe in this thing. Like, is it my responsibility to change their mind? I don't
Sure.
know, but like yeah, I would rather use my energy elsewhere for people
Yeah.
that are already like, hey, I'm super interested, but like I could use some help. Like, yeah, I'll
Sure.
go talk to them to make a little bit more progress, I would say.
Makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. All right. Well, man, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
I think that it's very insightful, and it's an area we haven't really covered here on the podcast yet. And it's a much, like I said, a larger, maybe more existential kind of topic, but how it still echoes and mirrors a lot of the things that even small nonprofits we work with are dealing with on different levels. And we're all kind of on the same journey trying to figure it out.
Totally.
Where can people find you, connect with you, or your organization, or what's the best way to do that?
I'm only on LinkedIn,
There
so
you go.
that's probably the best place. So yeah, find me on LinkedIn. And then if you are interested in what I was mentioning about that community, you can check out opendoorclimate.com. And that's where you can find like this directory of just a bunch of climate professionals willing to chat. I think those are the two main places.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Daniel. I'm excited to hear about what you guys are working on, and man, hopefully people can get on board and we can, I don't know, save the world or something.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you
All
having me
right.
on, and thanks for the platform.
Of course. All right. Talk to you soon.
All right, sounds good.
Here we are at the end. You made it. Thank you so much for listening this far. And if you'd like to hear more from Nonprofit Connect brought to you by Rogue Creatives, well, then make sure to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on so you don't miss out. Because you don't want to miss out. You want to be on the in, you know? You want to be on the inner circle. You want to know what's going on. Also, if you're interested in working with us or want to reach out or tell us how amazing we are, visit our website, npconnect.roguecreatives.com. You can get all the info there. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Well, we won't see you. We'll hear you. Well, you'll hear us. Whatever. Bye.